Hello, and welcome to Instructional Design from the Ground Up. And tonight we have another fantastic show. You can see Peter and Teresa there. They're waving and smiling and doing all the things that people like to do with us on YouTube. And Denise is down there. She's kind of behaving, but she's kind of had a ratty day, and I've kind of had a ratty day. And Teresa's on IBM products, so we're gonna have one of those shows tonight, but we're gonna talk about some really cool stuff. And just remember that if you are an instructional designer or you do anything with learning and performance improvement, if you're a teacher, a trainer, a subject matter expert, manage the process, or just interested in the field of instructional design, we hope you find a place here with us. And let's get going. I can't wait, Denise.
All right, I'm going to do some introductions so that you know who these fine folks are. We have Peter Berverso. He is an experienced coach, educator, and thought leader. He's active in the human and organizational performance improvement community, and he has been since 1996. Peter leads Ventivia, LLC, and is president of the Potomac chapter of the International Society for Performance Improvement. Served 15 years as adjunct faculty for the University of Phoenix, John Sperling School of Management, Vice Dean Board Member of the Innovation and Organizational Change Management Institute, and Human Performance Lead for Marine Corps Systems Command. His clients include federal and state agencies, educational institutions, nonprofit organizations, and social entrepreneurs. There is so much to his background that we will be putting more of it in the description of our YouTube channel. What a rich experience,
We'd have
well
to
of
go to a
experience.
3 hour show just to get the introductions in tonight.
Yeah.
And next we have Teresa Valles. She is an experienced instructional designer, educator, coach, and change leader in digital learning and training. Teresa works at the Faculty Academic Center of Excellence at Towson University and has been working with Ventivia LLC in the performance improvement community for the past 3 years. She is a member of the International Society for Performance Improvement, Potomac chapter. As co creator of the ISPI Design Studio, Teresa recently developed a Superpowers Toolkit prototype. She brings her signature strengths wherever she goes. And you'll know when Teresa is in the room. Those were her words, not mine.
We
You're also
will.
going to know when she's down the hall because Teresa and I shared the classroom for at least two courses, right? Is that correct? Yeah. And
Yes.
and Teresa's office was right down the hall from where the classroom was. And as soon as it was time to start, I was always put out a little song for Teresa and call her into the classroom because she was always so busy. This is somebody that doesn't sit down, and I know Peter doesn't sit down. These two are the Energizer Bunny times 20. And you're just not going to see a picture of them. You're going to see a movie of them because they're always moving around. So, thank you so much for being here. We've been talking about this for so long. And for those of you that are watching, background on this is Teresa and Peter and my wife Karen and I all got together at Terry's in Berkeley Springs. And I guess you know Terry's is now closed.
I know. I'm
uh,
heartbroken.
yeah, the place has been there since I've been coming up here, which is almost 30 years. So, uh, we did have a nice lunch. We talked about all these things, and we made an agreement that we would get these two professional people on here. At ISPI, we have not had a lot of chance to talk about ISPI in here, so I can't wait. So, Peter, Teresa, take it away. We are eager to hear what you have to say.
Well, I have to share. The first time I met Teresa was at an ISPI, International Society for Performance Improvement event that I hosted here at my house in just over the mountain from where Chuck is. So I'm in Great Cape in West Virginia, very close to Berkeley Springs. And then Teresa and I had been talking, and she was introduced by another ISPI colleague, and we were doing some strategic planning, and we had this weekend workshop. And the first time I met her was here in my house. So she drove up to West Virginia, and I could tell you I knew she was in the room, and so did everybody else. And I've been a Teresa fan ever since.
Oh, thank you,
Yeah,
Peter.
she's so shy. I think it was that time in Dayton, Ohio, Teresa, right? That
That's a transformative moment.
No, that's a story we'll share later. But yeah,
That's
so
fine.
take it away.
Yeah.
So
So we're
over to you, Teresa.
Oh, you want me to go first, Peter?
Well, if you have something you'd like to share, I would love it. And then I'm going to jump
No, what
back
I
in.
wanted to say was I was really happy to all of this connection is all relative to instructional design, really, as a common denominator here. In my work and with the International Society for Performance Improvement, um, I was introduced about 8 years ago to this wonderful society. And even though I wasn't a performance improvement consultant, as many folks are who are part of this organization that Peter will share with everyone here in the audience, I felt very comfortable and I saw a great opportunity and overlap in the work that instructional designers do with performance improvement. So Peter, take it away with ISPI.
Oh, thank you, Teresa. And I would like to say that when I worked for the Marine Corps, and I do have a long list of experiences, but two of my character strengths and my superpowers are love of learning and curiosity. So I dig into things. I'm not a skimmer. I'm a deep diver. When I was with the Marine Corps, technically I was an ISD. So I was a instructional systems specialist, 1750 government series. And my job really, I thought that my job was to make sure the Marines came home. So everything that we did equipped them to be mission capable. And I believe that in so many organizations, the instructional designers are really the unsung heroes, the anthropologists, the ethnographers, the design thinkers on their feet that really have the toolkit to help organizations, especially in these really crazy times and this movement that we're all witnessing and hearing about, the great resignation, or what I would like to perhaps call the great revelation. So people waking up to the kind of this, I'll say, the fact that their strengths aren't perhaps being used. And one of the questions that I asked myself when we were thinking about this is, we're usually thinking about the job and what we're getting in the job. But my question really is, what are we becoming? So if I'm in that job, in that relationship with that organization, with that team, what am I really becoming? And am I able to bring my strengths, my superpowers to work every day? And if the answer is no, then I'm leaving de-energized, kind of deflated, and really not too excited for what's ahead. And I think the pandemic certainly woke a lot of us up to that. Feeling stressed, uncertain, and then in an environment, a work environment that's perhaps not supporting things that are energizing, we just continue to deplete ourselves. And I think that's one of the reasons or symptoms for what we're seeing today in terms of the sheer number of people that are either leaving the workforce or switching jobs. And I think it's really incumbent on those of us that have these skills to help turn the tide and to help turn the tide in helping people find meaning in work through the exploration and the cultivation of their superpowers or superpower signature. One of the reasons I love the International Society for Performance Improvement, and we'll talk a little bit about this thing that we created called the Design Studio, was it gave me an opportunity outside of my traditional role, either in Ventivia as a full-time consultant or moving in and out of organizations. What ISPI did was it gave me a place to learn, practice, and improve. So here I had an audience of instructional designers, of really curious people that were not afraid to tell you when you were wrong. Right? We've had people come in.
I can't
All right, that's it
imagine.
for the presentation.
This is so funny. We had one presentation, and this person came in, and they were walking us through. So I'm not going to talk about what they talked about, but it was education related, and so we have a lot of PhDs in education. your EDDs and instructional designers, people with a huge amount of experience. And this person was walking us through something. And one of our members said to him, he's about halfway through the presentation, he said, "Well, thank you for coming." And the person just kept going. He said, "No, thank you for coming." So they are not afraid to be brutally honest with you. So it's really helped me sharpen my skills. And people have always been so generous with their time, with their intention, and attention. So it's really been an honor to be the president of the Potomac chapter. Potomac being a Native American or Indigenous American for the place where you bring something. So kind of a trading or marketplace. And I like to think of ISPI Potomac as the place where we bring our skills and share the best of what we have with each other. So it's a very sharing community. I've been the president for 5 years for a 1-year term. So if anyone that's watching would like to be the next former president, please let me know, because I'm very happy to work with you. I would love to continue to be president, but I would like to give the opportunity for someone else to have fun and to really explore really what makes them tick. And Teresa has been right there every step of the way. And I'm so honored that she has been, and that she graciously chose to support ISPI and Ventivia, my organization, and our programs with her capstone graduate project, the Superpowers Toolkit. So maybe, Teresa, you would like to share a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about superpowers, we're actually referring to something that is connected to positive psychology, and in particular, the VIA character strengths. And anyone who's interested can take a look at that and Google that. So in the work that Peter was doing with clients that I asked, he graciously allowed me to come. I mean, I said, I really would love to learn more about performance improvement. And by the way, my number one character strength is love of learning. And so I said, I would really love the opportunity to attend some of your sessions to learn what do you mean by cognitive diversity and how that impacts teams, and what are the frameworks that you use and the tools that you use. And two of the tools that we'll talk about will be the VIA character strengths that I just mentioned, another one that Peter's going to mention called emergenetics. And as part of my capstone, I worked in the data that Peter had collected on the training that he had conducted to actually identify areas where there was cognitive dissonance instead of cognitive harmony or harmony between team members. And there were some important findings in the work that we did that I will briefly mention. And once again, I really don't want to steal the show from what Peter wants to say, but some of the resounding themes that were evident in the data were a lack of role clarity. Now, of course, much of this was happening during the disruption, and I think we all who were working in organizations, myself included, felt that taking on new roles and expanding in what was required of the times. So role clarity was a concern. Team cohesion, and Peter can talk more about this, but he likes to call that really, do I really want to work with you? Do I trust you? More of a collaborative overload, Folks were looking for empowerment in the sense of wanting to have a voice, and communication issues across the board. So what we did in the capstone was we took a look at the data and we developed a prototype that would help organizations through the toolkit. The prototype was leading towards a toolkit that would help organizations in understanding the cognitive diversity among them and how to actually use the strength instead of the differences as a negative. So It was more about using a strengths-based approach versus a deficit. And Peter, you could take it from there.
Well, thank you, Teresa. So when Teresa talks about this research, so a big part of my work, my consulting work, I don't like to tell people what to do. So, but I do like to go on an explorative journey, and most of those explorations happen through a series of workshops called "Cultivating Superpowers" or "Smarter, Faster," smarter communication, faster collaboration, stronger commitment, building stronger commitment, courageous agility, leading beyond the masks. So these are the titles of some of the programs. But basically what we're doing is running a series of leadership development, leadership exploration, exploratory workshops, many of them in the agile transformation space, because that's where a lot of people are working these days. But in leadership development and culture development kind of programs. And over the course of the pandemic, I facilitated workshops with about 3,000 people using an electronic tool. So the reason I love facilitating is because I have a love of learning. And I learned so much just by being present with so many brilliant people, sharing what's on their mind. And what's on their mind in terms of what's working for them today, what are their strengths, what are their headaches, what's in the way, and what can we do about it. So those are some of the things that we explore in these often multi-session workshops. And from those 3,000 participants, I have, 100,000 data points from real live people sharing their real life stories about the challenges that they have every day. And as Teresa mentioned, some of the top kind of challenges that people have, but the two that show up most frequently, either at I'll say the staff level or at I'm going to say leadership level, but I don't actually believe leadership is a thing, which we can have some discussion about that sometime. But at the management level, we'll say, is communication. So people talk about communication all the time, and communication is the problem. But when you dig a little bit deeper, the symptoms are more related to having multiple competing priorities, because I have 4 or 5 people telling me what to do, or I have 37 meetings on my calendar this week, and I probably only need to attend 2 of them. But for whatever reason, they're on the calendar. We, click yes, and we show up in these meetings. So a lot of what we're seeing are competing priorities and things labeled as communication. But when we dig a little bit deeper, what we're really seeing or really even in breakout rooms with people, and they're sharing, it's that they're feeling like they're not being seen or heard. So I think really the problem is more around listening and recognizing the other person's strengths and what they're bringing to the table. One of the things that Teresa and I talked about, and one of the things that was very evident in the strengths data. So the data is very clear that people are more engaged, more enthusiastic, more energized when they bring their strengths to work every day, not their skills. So we often confuse our strengths for our skills, like what we're good at doing. But our strengths and our character strengths and our cognitive diversity are the strengths in terms of who we are, the person that we actually are when we show up as our authentic self. So when I can show up as my authentic self in my strengths and stand, what I like to say is stand boldly in my strengths, even though I'm sitting, I show up as a different person, fully capable, fully energized, fully enthusiastic. And when a team shows up standing firmly, boldly in their strengths, I mean, this is how magic happens. There's a wonderful quote, and I have this picture here of Michelangelo's David, and I've been using David as a metaphor quite a bit. So there's a quote from Michelangelo who supposedly said, "I saw the angel in the marble and I carved to set him free." And I said, "Well, that's great. So when was the last time that your boss saw the angel in you, right? And worked to carve to set you free?" But I said, "Well, that's, Michelangelo's perspective, hundreds of years later, quoting someone. Um, and if you haven't actually seen David in person, you have to. I mean, it's a life-changing experience." But I said, "Well, if that's Michelangelo's perspective, what might David's perspective have been?" So maybe David's perspective was, I saw the angel in myself and I just needed a hand, someone with a little bit of a chisel. So I think that's really, instructional designers have the chisel to help these managers, these leaders, and people in organizations to discover their inner David or their superpowers, and really to help set those free. Because once we do, that's when magic and miracles happen in organizations. What we tend to do in organizations is create a lot of extra weight, processes, tools that may have served a purpose, 10, 15, even 3 years ago, that are now irrelevant in this new world of work. So I think it's really incumbent on all of us to stop adding and start subtracting. So one of the other things that Michelangelo says is, basically I took away everything that wasn't David. So if it's not part of our David or our objective, then maybe it's time to sweep some of that debris away and say, oh, well, what do we really need to do to accomplish our mission? Which is a group effort, right? So each of us has our own superpowers. And one of the things that became very evident in the data when we looked at this across emergenetics, which defines or identifies our 4 thinking strengths and 3 behavioral strengths, and then the VIA character, which looks at 24 character strengths. Most of us have 5 to 7 signature strengths in VIA. But when I put those things together, we have between, 7 to 9 strengths that make what I would call our superpower signature. But when I look across all the possible dimensions and possible combinations, the possible combinations are more infinite than the number of people that are on the planet. So everyone, I like to think of it this way. One of the things, or really the only thing we have in common, is that we're all unique. So when I think about a job description, Teresa and I were talking a little bit earlier, and so a job description doesn't fit a job. It doesn't even fit a person. So it's a list of attributes that an ideal candidate might have, but everyone is completely unique. So of the 30 things that are on the list, what are the 3 that I'm going to really be good at? And what's actually needed? The other thing that's really fascinating in the data and in some of the tools and the research that Teresa and I have done, there's basically 10 dimensions to work. This comes from human performance technology and organizational network research, and there's a whole toolkit around this. But so there are 10 dimensions that we map. Only 2 of them have to do with what you do. The other 8 are about basically the spiritual side of work, where you find meaning, how you engage in trusting relationships, and what makes you feel alive when you're using your character strengths. And then the rest of them are about the relationships that you have with the people that you work with, your customers, your stakeholders, your boss, your direct reports, and how you interact. So most of the dimensions of work have nothing to do with the task that you actually do. But we focus all of our time on the task, which is like 20%. So it's, Pareto principle, 80-20. So we focus all of our attention on the task when most of the work is really maintaining the relationships or the relational architecture that enables work to get done. And that's what we see in terms of these competing priorities, feeling disempowered, not having role clarity, because we're not working on the relationships, we're working on the task, or sitting in a meeting, not doing any work. Because I did another study where we looked at teams and meetings and some other things in a fairly large, well, really large organization. And what we found was that none of the work was actually happening in the teams that existed in these meeting spaces. So people were going back to their desks, so to speak, to do the work. But they spent, you know, about 50% of their time in these meetings. So when I looked at the data in that regard, it was basically I'm wasting 50% of my time in meetings where nothing is happening. We're basically status reporting to people that could care less about our status. And I, frankly see that every day. And it's another one of these reasons that people feel disheartened and feel like they don't have a voice. So anyway, I'm rambling a little bit. So Teresa, please jump in. I'm going to open the blinds again, and hopefully I'm not shining too much.
That's a halo above you, Peter.
One of the things that I really want to emphasize, and I think it's very clear to anyone listening very closely, is that a lot of what we're talking about has to do with analysis and instructional design. And Peter, that's what I kept on hearing through what you were talking about. And I know Chuck is a firm believer in that as well. And I'm happy to have Chuck or Denise jump in here too, because if there was anything of a takeaway here for ISD, it really is, listening to the notion of what Peter is saying. I had so many sessions working with folks to find out what the issues were. And a lot of that is so much analysis, right? Before you jump into.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from an analysis point of view, I look at the interview instrument or even the focus group instrument when you're data collection, during the data collection process. And it's all about finding out what the strengths and the weaknesses are of an organization. And I think one of the best ways you can find that out is by talking to people, is to build that sense of trust so that you can learn their story and hear and listen to. Yeah, it's all about listening, active listening, to find out their story so that you can then recommend ways. But you can't do that until you understand and really get to know the story behind the person and then ultimately the organization.
Yeah, you have to do it that way. And people that just start in this field don't appreciate how much time you can spend on analysis and just gathering data. And an example, I was a principal investigator on a very large grant. We spent 2 years in analysis, 2 years in nothing but analysis. And you think about that, and if you're a classroom teacher or a trainer and you're putting together onboarding for tomorrow and you've got 2 hours to fill, you're going to think, well, okay, Chuck, whatever. But, when you get to the level of things that Peter's talking about and Teresa's talking about, and Denise just did a major project at the University of North Carolina gathering data. And those of us that do this for any length of time, we don't even consider moving forward until we have the data. We don't want to look at anything that happens past this except a general idea of where the organization wants to go with what they're doing. And this whole notion, Peter, of personalization, the fact that we are human beings, we're working in environments. And my picture of the last couple of years is this chemistry has changed, and I don't think it's ever going to go back. And so now 30 to 35 to 40% of people say they will not go back into what would be a traditional or legacy workplace. They will not go back in an office. They would rather sit at home and not work. I mean, it's gotten to that point. And I think that really amplifies and puts the spotlight on what you're saying about, take these superpowers, as you call them, and let's look at why we are who we are. Let's find out what really makes us happy and fulfilled and how we best support the mission, whatever that is. And I love when you brought up leadership, because I still don't know what leadership is. I still don't know what that is. And we have this discussion every once in a while. I mean, I could say within a context of a certain situation, I always call it situational contextual leadership. You know, you have to have something that you frame that around. I don't walk in a room and I'm a leader. I mean, that's silly. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so the next session we have is going to be on leadership because I got something to say about that. But what is so beautiful about your approach is it's not about the metrics of accomplishing a goal in and of itself. It's about the metrics of bringing people into the equation to do the best that they can do, bringing their superpowers and everything else that they have, and letting organizations, which I think has been always an issue that I've had to face. Organizations don't want to go there sometimes. They don't want to spend time on what they call the soft side of things. They just want results, and you get them the best way you can, and move on. And I have always been, like the three of you, more concerned about people than I was ever concerned about anything else. And there are contracts that I gave up because I could not ignore the reality of what things were doing to people, whether it was a process of designing and implementing or whether what it was doing to the workforce. And, you know, we could get into a whole show about what instructional designers and performance improvement family need to think about in terms of what they're willing to do and what they're willing to accept. You know, there is that fine line of I'm not going to do that. And I think it rests firmly on
Mm-hmm.
the shoulders, Peters, of what you're talking about.
Yeah, and thanks, Chuck. I think it's so, a couple things. I think it's so important, one, to recognize we are different, we are human beings, and um, that I have a preference for analytical thinking, hence all the analysis. So it just pours out because it's energizing for me. It almost
Mhm.
doesn't even matter what I'm looking at. It's like, oh, that's really pretty cool. Um, so, but one of the things that we're doing with the design studio, and this is something
Mhm.
that really any organization could set up, is I like to call it like where your ideas see the light of day. So we have people coming to us saying, I've pitched this at work and basically got shut down and told that I was, every expletive around. Well, bring it here, give it a try. Um, we'll give you some feedback, but we're going to take you through a process where you're going to gather some data, interview some people, do some rapid prototyping. So we can do this in a really iterative and agile way where we're using the feedback and the live trials basically with human beings that might be using this product, if you will, or training or workshop or whatever really it is, book, videos. We have working with some folks that do video and collect some data from your social media, from live interviews, from observing people using your system. So using some of the fancy term design thinking tools, but these are instructional design tools and always have been. So it's really allowing people this place to experiment and to get the feedback that they need in a safe environment where someone's not going to steal their work. I mean, that's one of the things people are very concerned about,
Yeah.
because have had a history of sharing something at work. Someone
Yes.
grabs it unattributed, and
Mhm.
then this other person who I might have a superpower for moving things along pretty fast, without convening, a group of other human stakeholders, then takes all the credit and gets promoted, and then there you are, not ever sharing your work again. So, in a safe place where people can practice and experiment and get feedback pretty quickly. So we're
Yeah, and I
really
love that
excited.
example of that of people stealing your stuff. I mean, people steal my stuff all the time. I just expect it to be stolen. Yeah, I know universities that actually copy my books and distribute it so that they don't have to pay for a textbook. But
Mm-hmm.
I remember I was in a conference in San Jose, and yeah, there's 50 people in the room, and they were going around talking about their proudest achievement. And I always like to go fast, not listen to this, but I decided to sit down and listen to it. And as they were going around the room, 6 people took credit for my work that I had. 6 people took credit for it. So it finally got around to me, and I'd written down their names, and I said, I would like to thank the following. And I read off their names. I said, I really appreciate the fact that you enjoyed my work and thought so much of it that you put your name on it.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's.
And I
Did you
think
get a standing ovation? I hope.
actually, everybody knew before that that was my work. I mean, I don't understand why
Mhm.
people thought this would pass, but and it's not like anybody that knows me knows I don't crow about anything. I never talk about anything I do. It's not who I am. It's not who I am. So the very fact that somebody else would take credit for it, I thought, okay, I can't sit through this. And this was when I was younger, so I was a little bit more willing to, poke people in the tummies. And but that happens to me. It happens to Denise. It happens to Teresa. It happens to Peter. And if you're watching this, you know it's happened to you. So the
Hmm.
real issue becomes, how do you internalize that stress and how do you externalize in a way that's professional and fair? And I tried to do that, but I was kind of mad at that point. But it's a very common thing. Why do you want to share certain things in an environment where you know you're not going to get credit and you know it's not going to make any difference at the end of the day? And it's not going to make any difference probably in your evaluation or if you're looking for a promotion or more money or more benefits or another week's vacation. And people have to ask themselves, am I willing to just put this out there? And am I willing to take the chance that someone else is going to take credit for this? And
I think it comes down to what Peter was saying about who are we and what do we want to become. And if sharing that kind of information falls in line with who you are and who you want to become in the world, because it matters to you that this information is out there and it's out there correctly, not necessarily attributed to you. It's nice if it is, but it should be. But just sharing that information for the sheer idea of wanting that information in the right hands, then it makes sense. But I think it really comes down to when you're asking about sharing information, not getting credit for it, it really is a matter of how much, for me, how much love I have for whatever it is I'm trying to share. And will it affect or touch at least one person out there? If it is, and it does, and that's my purpose, and that's the reason I would share it. But I think it's an individual thing.
And I love sharing. I mean, one of the reasons I have this love of learning, and it's kind of always been this way. I love sharing, but I always do my best to say whatever it is that I'm sharing, where it came from.
Yes.
If it wasn't
Yes.
mine, like, oh,
Absolutely.
That is
yeah.
one of the biggest lessons every young professional needs to learn, because it happens too often where credit is not it's not given where it's due. And I've learned that lesson a long time ago in my first professional job. When I first got out of college, I didn't mean to, but I took credit for something that I didn't do completely on my own, and I didn't mean to do that. And I was called out on it, and I was mortified that I couldn't believe I did that. So sometimes people don't even realize they're doing that. And owning up to that was one of the biggest things that I needed to do as a professional. And ever since that day, even when someone doesn't deserve credit, I give it anyway. I'd rather give the credit than not give the credit, because I am so paranoid of leaving something out unknowingly, not meaning to. But I try to instill that in, anybody I mentor, any students, interns. Always give credit. Always give credit as much. Just even if it's
well,
not.
anybody that's taught in higher education and has to grade papers
Yeah.
realizes. And what always used to tickle me is when they stole my work, taking my class, and and didn't cite it. And it becomes so funny that sometimes I'm sure they didn't mean it, but come on, you know.
Mhm.
So, but my anthem has always been, and this goes back to leadership too. And I'm not a leader, but I always have a philosophy about this, and Denise is probably sick of hearing it, but I'm going to say it one more time. When I work with groups and I'm responsible for those groups, I never take credit for anything. But if something's wrong, I always take the heat for whatever is wrong, and I take the responsibility
Mm-hmm.
for that mistake or mistakes, and I take the responsibility to fix it. So I always have cover for everyone, but I never take any credit. And
That that's creating the safe environment for people to learn and grow. Right there, that's
Mhm.
the definition of leadership, really. I mean, when you, if
whatever
you
that
if
is,
it's really allowing that safe opportunity for people to be able to learn and grow with you.
this is great stuff. I I love the fact you're talking about ISPI in here too, because we just talk about generic instructional design. We really don't talk about organizations. I don't think we've ever talked about organizations. So uh, I think it's wonderful that you're talking about it, Peter. I'm so happy you're going to be president for the next 5 years. I congratulate you. And
No.
you know, I I think that's wonderful, especially with the commitment of time and resources that I know it takes to do that. So, I think Denise and I'll be there at your 10th anniversary as president, and we will offer a toast.
We'll bring cake.
If I get a
I th-
pin or something.
Peter, Peter, I think that Denise and Chuck should join the design studio.
Yes.
Sign us up.
I thought you were going to say they should Chuck should be the
president.
president.
No,
Oh,
no, no,
yeah,
no, no,
that's
no.
true.
No, they want to
You,
move forward. They want to move forward. Oh, there's no
you,
way.
you know the design studio is really cool. So we have this, it's I'll say semi-structured, but a series of methods that we take people through. Again, we're to help your ideas see the light of day. But part of that seeing the light of day is once you have something baked, is to use your superpowers, and this is kind of where the leading beyond the masks comes from, recognizing the superpowers in others.
Others.
Because if I want to move my idea forward, I need to recognize, honor, and respect the superpowers of others so that I can share this in a way that will make sense to them. So we use this science, these strengths, the VIA strengths and emergenetics, to help understand the best ways for, again, smarter communication, faster collaboration, building stronger commitment, because I'm speaking to someone as if I'm listening from their perspective. And it's that listening, the only way I can listen is if I'm present. And I like to call this deep listening. So where I'm fully present, understanding, and really, in many ways, standing in reverence to your uniqueness and your strengths. And I think as an instructional designer, and when you're sitting across, especially from a subject matter expert, when you can be present with them and fully honor what they're providing, I mean, like your relationship, and Teresa just has shared many stories with me about her relationships with faculty, and it it's exponential opportunity for everyone.
Absolutely. And I just think it's wonderful. And David, I want to say good evening to you. David is with the International Masonry Institute and Instructor Certification Program. He's one of my students and a faithful watcher and commenter. But the other thing about David is he's a tremendous leader. He's very bashful about that. He will never say that, but he's one of those people that you look up to him and you want to be David when you grow up. So when he talks about these things, we spend a lot of time thinking about it. So thank you for being with us, David, tonight. And you know, Teresa and Peter, will you promise me you'll come back? And I want to poke real hard at leadership, and maybe we can go off on maybe there's a design studio or something else. And I also want to make sure that people know how to get a hold of you with ISPI. So if they're interested in joining or being part of that, I don't know if you're back to doing face-to-face meetings yet or whether you're doing different things, but I want everybody to be able to have an opportunity to get a hold of you, both of you, and we'll put that in the links, I'm sure, Denise, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if there's
Mm-hmm.
another link, I'm losing my voice. If there's another link that we can put in there, let's do that. But I think people really, really need to understand instructional designers and people in performance improvement. We're all the same family here. It's
Yeah.
not like we're disagreeing. And I remember back, oh, well, way too many years ago, we started writing on performance improvement when it was still ASTD. And, it was such a family about things then that this is all part of what we do. It's not one's better than the other or anything else. And now we seem to see these little rivers of thought that I don't think are productive, that somehow we're not in a family together. And, I'm just so happy that ISPI exists. And Catherine, I don't know if
Yeah.
Catherine's watching, but Catherine's taught me so much about ISPI and others.
Mhm.
One gentleman that passed away, who I had a great fondness for. So let's foster this relationship. Let's look for ways to share our common strengths and our superpowers. I love that term, Peter. That's so creative. It's just, I feel like that halo around your head right now is well deserved, and we shall.
It is. It's wonderful.
It's that
It's like
West
perfectly,
Virginia sunshine that's
perfectly
coming through.
timed.
I'm
You
just
know?
heading to the west there.
It's almost heaven here, right?
Almost
You're
heaven.
gonna get me singing again. Stop it, Chuck.
No.
I just
You're
got
gonna-
back
you're
from
gonna
heaven, Italy, so I was there for 2 weeks. So heaven in Italy, almost heaven in West Virginia.
Oh gosh. Well, I got to hear that story offline about all that stuff's going on. But thank you so much, Teresa, Peter, and gosh,
Thank you.
I mean,
Thank
it's just
you.
such an
Really-
honor. Such an honor to have you on here.
It was so
And
wonderful.
I hope that we can all get in the same place at the same time sometime, because I want you to get with Denise and Hector, and we're gonna have to find a nice lunch spot somewhere, and we can all get together and share communion like we did when we got together in Berkeley Springs. That was such a joyous afternoon, and I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed that time. So, anything else you want to add before we bow out gracefully and Denise sings our theme song?
Oh,
Don't
I
tempt
can't wait
me.
for the singing.
Do not tempt
Yeah.
me.
So the Rhode Island accent you hear is more pronounced than singing. So
Maybe.
no, no, we're moving on. So
Just move on. It's better.
let's move on. So thank you so much. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Denise.
Pleasure.
And thank you, Teresa.
Thank you.
My goodness, thank you.
Thank you
Namaste.
so much. Thank you, everyone. Almost heaven.